Welcome, everybody. It's good to see you.
Hello.
We were just talking, if we were all in a conference room together, this is when you'd be walking in the room and some of you would be sitting in the back. Feel free to take a seat up front.
Yeah, front and center today.
Front and center, that's right. We know who's sitting up front. Yeah. There we go. It's good to see everybody. As we're getting settled in, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. We'd love to know where you're located in the state and what program you're with. I know there's a lot of home visitor programs, so we'd like to know who's here from what programs. And just a reminder to mute yourself as you're joining the room. I know when you come in, your microphone might be live. So just a reminder. Thanks. Well, hello, Jenny from the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition.
Hello, Brenda.
Yes. Oh, look at where everybody is. This is nice. Valley Center, parents as teachers. Where's Valley Center, Julie? If you could drop that in the chat, help me get oriented. That'd be great. North of Wichita. Okay, thank you. This is great. All right. Well, I know that we have our moderator, Michelle, with us, who's going to get us started, and then Jen and I'll take over from there.
Thank you, Brenda. Hello.
Yes.
This one is on Zoom. I'm going to be doing facilitating for this meeting today. We're going to get started here in just a few minutes. Just a couple of things we want to go over. We just ask that everyone go ahead and mute the microphone. Unless you're asked to unmute it, please keep it on mute so that everybody can hear well. We do encourage comments and conversation in the chat, so we'll be monitoring that. If you have questions, you can drop them in here and we'll try to get them answered. Also, we are recording this session. Once it's completed, it should be updated and loaded into the conference platform in about an hour after this. So if you want to go back and rewatch it, you'll be able to do that. So go ahead and get started with the breastfeeding support and the proper role of the home visitor. Today we have speakers with us. I'm going to start by introducing Brenda Bandy. She's the IGCLC and is the co-executive director of the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition and oversees the KBC's programs, which includes work with employers, child care providers, families, public hospitals, and community organizations. She's an active member representative to the U.S. Breastfeeding Committee since 2011 and served on their board of directors. Brenda is an international board certified lactation consultant and a retired wellness leader of 20 years. She has a passion for bringing people together to remove barriers within families from thriving in Kansas. Next will be Jenny. Is it Toland, Jenny? Am I saying that right?
Toland, yes.
Toland. She's BSN RN and is the co-executive of the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition. Prior to this, she worked for more than 3 years at the Western Plains Medical Complex in Dodge City, Kansas, as a nurse in OB and in NICU, helping breastfeeding families. She also worked 2 years for the Ford County Health Department as a maternal and infant program coordinator and a WIC nurse. Working in a hospital system and in public health gave Jenny new perspectives on barriers to health equity. Her personal experiences breastfeeding her children for various durations using multiple modalities made it clear to her how important support and education are in achieving fulfilling breastfeeding journeys. These experiences fuel Jenny's desire to advocate for breastfeeding/chest feeding families. Jenny led the formation of the Ford County Breastfeeding Coalition in 2018 and serves as its volunteer executive director. Working in Southwest Kansas has provided her with unique experiences with diverse populations who have been historically underserved and or underrepresented. Jenny brings a fresh and unique perspective to the KBC, and she is eager to find creative ways to connect communities and families across the state who normalize breastfeeding.
Great.
Welcome these two, and I will let them take over.
Great. Thank you so much for the nice introduction. It is an honor to be here at the Kansas Home Visitor Conference. Home visitors have a very special place in Jenny and I's heart because you guys are at the intersection of so many systems, and you actually get to be with the families often in their homes to spend more time with them than a lot of other providers might be able to do. So when we say the powerful role of the home visitor, we really mean that you have a lot of power over helping families to be successful. And we're going to talk about what that means to be successful with breastfeeding. So before we get started, though, we like to kind of set the stage by acknowledging that breastfeeding is very much about our stories. It's about our own journeys, maybe perhaps personally through breastfeeding, those that we've heard from friends and family. And we just want to acknowledge that we bring all of that to our work. And that's, I think, what makes us often very effective is because we bring our full selves to what we do. So we have to acknowledge that what we've heard about breastfeeding, and I'd like for you to reflect on that. What are the things that you've heard, maybe read, maybe heard on social media, in the news, from your neighbors, from friends and families? What have you experienced if you have breastfed yourself, your own personal experience? What about siblings, other relatives in your family? Were you breastfed? What did your mom tell you about breastfeeding? Was it something that even happened in your family? And those, I think those stories that are passed down from generation to generation can be really impactful about our view about breastfeeding. And then just who do you know who is breastfed? Maybe you don't know very many people at all in your community, or maybe you're in one of those communities where, as I heard in one county, they said, that's just what we do here. And so there seems to be different cultures even within our state of who do we know who's breastfed and how common of a practice is that. So just acknowledging that what we've heard, what we've experienced, we're bringing to both our work with families and also to this discussion over the next hour and a half. And it's all valid. It's all important. And we do want you to share in the chat. So make sure you found the chat. Hopefully by now, everybody knows how to drop in information in the chat. Jenny's going to be monitoring that. So I want to get started after that discussion about setting the stage for breastfeeding rates in Kansas. So this is the latest information that we have about breastfeeding rates in Kansas compared to the rest of the country. And so you can see on the far left side, breastfeeding initiation. That can be one breastfeeding experience after birth. And they count that as breastfeeding initiation. And you can see that nearly 90% of families in Kansas choose to breastfeed, but it may not be for as long as they would like. And then we look at exclusive breastfeeding at 3 months. The rate goes down to a little less than half. Exclusive breastfeeding at 6 months, we're at about 30% of infants are still exclusively breastfeeding at 6 months. And then when we get out to a year, which of course would be mixed feeding, we've got a little over a third of families that are still doing that. So the good news is that in Kansas, we exceed the national average in all of those measures. So yay, Kansas, we're, with your help, are doing a really good job. And the sad news is this duration story, right? We know that families want to breastfeed, but they're not able to continue breastfeeding for as long as they would like. And that's why we see the numbers declining over time. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today is why is that? And if anybody is tech savvy, I created a little poll out there on Pathable that you could drop in. What are you seeing in your community for barriers for breastfeeding? And just let us know. You can check more than one, but what are the barriers? And I'm sure that we have some common themes, and then we also have some things that are unique to different communities. But that's really what the task is before us, is to address those barriers.
Brenda, could you take a second just to define what exclusively breastfed means?
Yes, great idea. Because that, that rolls off our tongue now. And sometimes we don't stop to define that. Exclusive breastfeeding means that the child's getting only breast milk. And that means no teas or water. They don't need water. They're obviously not getting formula supplements, that their only thing that they're getting is breast milk. And so when we measure that over time, the infant only needs breast milk till about the middle of its first year of life, till about 6 months of age. So that's exclusive, meaning nothing else other than breast milk. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Good point. So let's take a look at some other data points that can help us to get a picture of how we're doing in Kansas compared to the rest of the country. So this is a point that we're doing extremely well. We are 7th in the nation in the number of babies born in Kansas in hospitals that are designated as baby friendly. Now that is a kind of a gold standard for maternity care practices. There are only 10 hospitals in our state that have achieved this designation. It is a big undertaking. It takes on average 2 to 3 years to meet all 10 requirements. And there are things like rooming in, and the baby is skin to skin after birth. All of these 10 practices that we know ultimately support breastfeeding for the mother and baby in the hospital setting. So we're doing a really good job of investing in our hospitals, and our hospitals are doing a really good job of getting moms and babies off to a good start. So this is something that we should celebrate. I think our hospitals are doing a good job. And we also have, some of you may be familiar with the other Kansas designation called the High Five for Mom and Baby. And that is a Kansas specific designation, whereas the baby friendly designation is a global designation. But High Five means these hospitals are implementing 5 of those 10 steps. So we have hospitals that are doing that. Almost all of our hospitals have that designation. All right, so this is the rate comparing Kansas to the rest of the nation on that exclusive breastfeeding through 6 months. So now we know what exclusive means. This is really the recommendation from the Academy of Breastfeeding, I'm not the Academy of Breastfeeding Medicine, the AAP, the Academy of Pediatrics. And what they've said is that infants should be exclusively breastfed for about the first 6 months. So this is an important measure, and one that is really difficult to move, to see progress on, because there are so many things that have to be in place in order for families to achieve exclusive breastfeeding for 6 months. And the hospital practice is just the first few days. So this is really talking about all the other things in the community that have to be in place to support families in order for them to make it to 6 months. And we're doing pretty good, 14th in the nation. But look what happens when we get out to a year. Kansas falls to about the middle of the pack. Still not bad, but we don't quite keep that same trajectory as we did at 6 months, meaning it's even a little bit harder in Kansas for families to breastfeed for a year. And in case you haven't heard, the AAP just issued new recommendations that they are now recommending breastfeeding, continued breastfeeding for 2 years and beyond. It used to be for the last 10 years that it was for 1 year or beyond. So you may be familiar with that. All of that is still in probably a lot of programs, handouts, and recommendations, but the AAP is now recommending 2 years of continued breastfeeding and beyond, as long as mutually desired. So I just wanted to point that out, that even our CDC measures will have to now change to measure out to 2 years, because they're only measuring to 1 year at this point. So breaking news. All right, now let's zoom in. We've been looking at the country and how does Kansas compare across the country. Now let's going to zoom in a little bit and look at our state and by the county. So find your county. These are breastfeeding initiation rates according to the Kansas birth certificate data. So just a little bit of a different measure, but still the average is 88% or 89% over the last 3 years. So you can see the pink counties are those that exceed the state average of 89%. Those that are in green fall between 89 and 80%, and those in white are under 80% initiation. And again, this initiation is measured by the birth certificate, so it could only be 1 or 2 breastfeeding experiences in the hospital, or it could be longer. But to me, what this really measures is intention. this is saying that 90% of families intend to breastfeed. They want to breastfeed. And then what happens from that point on is really sometimes out of their control, or it is based on where the other factors in their lives that kind of come into play, those other barriers that we're going to be talking about. So I just wanted to mention that this is really, to me, an intention to breastfeed. So you can see that there are some areas in our state that are doing better than others. A big shout out to Wichita County, 97.6% out there. Okay. So another thing that I wanted to point out is not only are there geographic disparities that we just saw on the breastfeeding map, but there's unfortunately disparities across race and ethnicity as well. And that's what this graph shows us. Over the same time period, you can see that we've already talked about the average initiation rate in Kansas was 89%, but that was not true for Black and Native American families. They had a lower than 89% initiation rate. And this is not that these families don't want to breastfeed, but more often the case is that the choice is simply not there. They don't have the same choice that many other families do when faced with all of the other situations in their life. We do know that Black and Native American families do breastfeed despite some of the systemic issues as well as some of the historical issues that they have faced. But what we're really seeing here in this gap is the inequity in choice for this. And I want to now play for you a great video that I think says it all beyond what I could say. So here we go. This is from Wichita. The people you're about to see are families in the Wichita area. So these are your neighbors. Let me see if here we go.
We are here to end the stigma that Black women do not breastfeed. There has been generations and generations of Black breastfeeding. I'm Joy, and I breastfeed. I'm Antoinette, I breastfeed, and these are my legacies.
I breastfed. These are my legacies.
I breastfed. This is my legacy.
I'm Shanika. I breastfed, and these are my legacies.
My name is Kamisha. I breastfed, and this is my legacy. These are my legacies. I breastfed.
I breastfed.
I breastfed. I breastfeed. I breastfeed.
I breastfed.
I breastfed. These are my legacies.
I think that to me is a very moving testament to the fact that not only do Black women breastfeed, but they have breastfed for generations. And these are in our own backyard. These are families in Wichita. So I just wanted to share that with you. That is on our website. So anybody is free to share that in any of the work that you do as well. Whoops, here we go. Okay, so this is a nice quote that I think gives us another perspective that exclusive breastfeeding goes a long way towards canceling out the health differences between being born into poverty and being born into affluence. It's almost as if breastfeeding takes the infant out of poverty for those first few months in order to give the child a fairer start in life. So it is one of the things that across all families is kind of a level setter. It gives everyone the same start in life. So it's one of the things that we can do to advocate for equity is that every infant should have access to breast milk. So it's really a health equity issue as well. Okay. So why is breastfeeding so important and why are we taking time to talk about this? As we know, there are health benefits and consequences for breastfeeding. And as you look at this list for the infant, you probably are aware of many of these. Remember, we started this talk by what have you heard about breastfeeding? I think as a country growing up in America, we know that breastfeeding is an important health benefit for infants, which is why nearly 90% of families want to breastfeed. What might surprise some of you is the one at the top of the list, the SIDS reduction. This is somewhat new information, and it's something that doesn't often get highlighted is that breastfeeding does reduce the risk of SIDS. And it's dose dependent. The longer that the baby is breastfed and the more exclusively, remember, without other supplements, the more of an impact it has on reducing SIDS. But even as little as 2 months of breastfeeding has a measurable impact on reducing SIDS. So I think that's one of the reasons why the AAP, in their revised recommendations for safe infant sleep, continues to elevate breastfeeding as the number 3 most effective strategy to reducing SIDS, just behind sleeping on their back and in a safe sleep environment. Number 3 on the list is to breastfeed. So I just wanted to point that out as you're talking to families. I think that should be something that we lead with a lot of times, especially prenatally. And then this is something we don't talk about very much at all, and that is what's in it for the mom. You know, usually parents, they're pretty sacrificing, they're willing to do everything for the infant, but really breastfeeding is something that the mom's doing and it benefits her as well. And the body of evidence is growing and growing about all of the things that it helps to the maternal health. We know about breast cancer and ovarian cancer. I'm happy to say that breastfeeding is being considered in the Kansas 5-year state cancer plan as a preventative strategy. So it's important that other systems like chronic disease prevention are recognizing that breastfeeding is a strategy for reducing some of these chronic disease in the mothers over the course of their lifetime. So it's really very effective. There also, we could add on this list, stroke is another one. There was new research that came out by our very own Dr. Lisette Jacobson out of KU School of Medicine that found there was a connection to stroke as well, reducing the risk of stroke. So this is something that we can talk to families about, especially if they have a family history of any of these chronic diseases, or if they have a current condition. Breastfeeding might be something to help lower their risk for some of these conditions as well. Okay. And when it comes to breast cancer and ovarian cancer, I just like to pull out that this is one that is very dose related. For every pregnancy, it reduces the risk of breast cancer by 7%, and every year of breastfeeding reduces it further by 4.3%. The same impact for ovarian cancer. So basically what this is saying is that the longer that a woman is breastfeeding, the lower her risk for breast and ovarian cancer. And they really think the connection there is having a pause from menstruation, and having that was part of the normal a woman's reproductive life, is that she would have not just weeks or months without menstruation, but measured in terms of years. And when that's not the case, it increases her risk for breast and ovarian cancer. And we also want to point out that this is breastfeeding, when it's going well, is actually preventative against women's postpartum depression and other postpartum mental health issues. So again, I stress, when it's going well, it's protective. It actually reduces her risk. But we know that when it's not going well, it can actually the opposite be true. So we want to make sure that women are getting the support that they need so they get the full protective effects of breastfeeding. So Jenny, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Brenda. So Brenda did a wonderful job laying out the reasons why people usually choose to breastfeed. There are such an abundance of medical benefits, health benefits for not just baby, but also mom. So what actually influences parents to decide to continue on with this journey? Usually education has been documented as the most influential factor. With additional education, initiation and continuation increase. Limited education can be influenced by media, ads. Again, Brenda started this conversation. What have you heard about breastfeeding? What do you think about it? What are your feelings about it when somebody discusses breastfeeding, or if you see someone breastfeeding in public? What does that do to you? Another big factor are peers and family. They can be more influential than any health benefits, any rational reasoning. They're your support people. And so what they think of breastfeeding can highly impact what you as an individual think about breastfeeding. So just another story here. For my personal journey, I breastfed my son, my oldest, for 2 weeks. My middle child, I exclusively pumped for 6 months. And my youngest daughter, I breastfed her when she weaned me at 16 months. The biggest factor that I can tell you what happened is my additional education and additional support. I was in a better place in life. I was able to get that education. I was able to find peer support, and then my family supported me as well. So that's just one of those examples on how stories matter and how education matters.
Absolutely.
Why do people choose not to breastfeed? Oh,
Did I get the right one?
yes. Okay. Why do people choose not to breastfeed? So again, people who are least likely to breastfeed are unmarried, teenage, minorities. Maybe it's an unplanned pregnancy. They've had lesser education. They could be on public assistance or be working with a prenatal clinic. So another story, my son that I breastfed for 2 weeks, I was 19, I was unmarried, I am a minority. It was an unplanned pregnancy.
Mhm.
I was just barely out of high school. Those things stick, and these are reasons that can make it difficult to breastfeed, but not impossible. With the right supports, it's more than something that just seems unattainable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder, Jenny, if you had a home visitor that was knowledgeable about breastfeeding, how that might have made a difference too. I'm thinking back to that last slide about peer support and the power of home visiting.
I really wish I would have. I think that could have changed my story.
Mhm.
So one of the things we can do with home visiting is really setting that stage for success. If you are seeing people prenatally, having that discussion, just asking a simple question of, how do you plan on feeding your baby? That is a great way to set the stage for success. Like Brenda mentioned, the AAP recommends breastfeeding for 2 years and beyond now. How can we even think about getting there if we haven't survived the first few hours, first few days, first few weeks? And that's where home visiting is really powerful, because so often we're in the hospital and we have all of these people around, our families are excited and they come visit, and then we go home and it's just us. There are no more nurses. Family kind of weans away. You might have a visitor here or there, and it's just you and this new baby.
Mhm.
We can really set the stage for success by providing a solid foundation with education and support.
Mhm. Yes.
One of the best ways to do that is educating people about skin to skin. Skin to skin is a magical way that we can help babies transition to life outside of the womb. Imagine being warm and comfortable with your mom for 9 months, and then all of a sudden you're outside, it's cold, there are bright lights, loud noises. Bringing baby skin to skin on mom's chest is a great way to calm everything down. It helps stabilize blood sugar, regulates baby's heartbeat, respirations, and just really helps baby transition from that wonderful birthing experience for us on the outside, which may not be so wonderful and a little rough for baby.
Mhm.
Having that skin to skin for 60 to 90 minutes actually allows baby to go through what we call as the golden hour,
Mhm.
which is that first hour of uninterrupted skin to skin that allows baby to go through 9 instinctual stages, which actually ends in baby finding the breast, latching on, and even suckling without any help.
Yeah.
So it's a naturally built-in instinct to do this.
So I had a question, Jenny. I've heard that skin to skin can be helpful even after you go home with the baby. How does that work? If you have an older baby, how can skin to skin be helpful?
Absolutely. So skin to skin releases the love hormone, we like to call it, or oxytocin. And when mom and baby are together doing skin to skin, or even mom and another parent, baby and another parent are doing skin to skin, it releases that oxytocin hormone, helps everyone relax. It has a calming effect. It can even be a little sedative and helps baby go to sleep if that's what we need. It helps mom have a letdown when we're breastfeeding as well.
Mhm. Huh, like a reset button, kind of.
Yes, great for older babies who are doing nursing strikes too.
Nice. All right, file that away.
Another thing hospitals are doing, in addition to trying to support that uninterrupted skin to skin, is delaying routine procedures. And what do I mean by routine procedures? That would be measurements, providing eye ointments, doing shots, footprints, and a big thing is delaying that wait. So by delaying the wait for even up to 24 hours, that can provide a more accurate birth weight, because if there's a long labor, long delivery, mom's had extra IV fluids, that can influence baby's weight. So within the first 24 hours, baby can rapidly lose some weight just from those excess fluids. And 24-hour rooming in. So no more of the babies being lined up in the bassinets in the nursery for everyone to look at and get their own oxytocin flowing. Now, most hospitals are doing 24 hours of rooming in with parents and baby. This allows parents to really bond with babies, learn their cues, learn how to communicate with their babies, and very importantly, learn feeding cues. So usually, and we'll talk about this later, when we think of hungry babies, we think of crying, and that's actually a late hunger cue. So we want to learn baby's cues before that, so we can get baby to breast and initiate that feeding early on.
Wow. Sounds like this would be good for families to know before they give birth. I'm thinking the home visitors in the audience who see families during pregnancy, if you could let them know that this 24-hour rooming in is going to happen, they can be prepared for that.
I think so. And then knowing that's ahead, that they can pay special attention to their baby and learn those cues, which is critical in establishing that milk supply, which most of us are so worried about. And family time. Some hospitals have even moved to limited visiting hours. Family time, again, encourages that bonding, learning baby's cues, facilitating that communication between parents and babies, transitioning life from outside of the womb. And most often we know visitors are ready. They want to come see baby. They are so excited. We want to meet baby, hold baby, cuddle baby. And it's well-meaning, but so often those early hunger cues are missed because another person is getting to know baby. And we think it's cute when they're stirring or when they're looking to the side, rooting around. We offer a pacifier and we're extending those hunger cues and making baby wait and wait. And next thing we know, baby's crying. So we give baby back to mom. Oh, baby's hungry. Well, it's very hard to latch on a baby when they're hangry because we've already told them, wait, you can wait, you can wait. Baby's decided I can't wait anymore and I need food now. So that makes it very difficult to latch on a baby that's upset and crying.
Yes.
So here are some strategies to really encourage timely milk onset. These are all things that help lay the foundation for a good supply. Having that skin to skin, hand expressing milk, making sure that we're doing frequent feedings, 10 or more during the first few days per 24 hours. We can even pump. And the studies show that expressing colostrum in the first hour versus the 2 to 6 hours in postpartum decreases the time to onset and actually increases production by 130%. I'll say that one more time. It actually increases production by 130% at 6 weeks.
For people in the back of the room, right?
Yeah, louder
Yeah.
for the ones in the back.
Yeah.
So expressing colostrum is a big deal.
Yeah, that is. And the hand expression, I didn't realize until I heard Dr. Jane Morton present here in Kansas a few years back. By hand expression, we're not talking about getting ounces of milk in a bottle. She was talking about just drops and drips on a blanket that she would put next to the baby that helped to wake up that sleepy baby. So that really, for me, helped to kind of lower the pressure for hand expression, that we weren't about volume. It was just about a little bit of milk coming out. Is that what we're talking about?
Absolutely. Our goal is to have a letdown. So we're going to hand express until we get a few drops, and that's perfect.
All right. Oh, we've got a video. Are we ready, Jenny?
Yes, we're ready. We're going to talk about recognizing those early feeding cues. love that video.
Mhm.
Good hairdos in there.
Yes.
So we're going to switch to talking about supporting the breastfeeding family.
Mhm.
Two of the best things you can do, not everyone has to be an expert. What we can do is know when to be a cheerleader and know when to be a lifeguard. And what do I mean by that? If things are going well, and we'll show you what things mean, yay, we're good, we can cheerlead, good job, mom. And when things are not normal, when moms are feeling over their heads, when we need to be a lifeguard to really help them and support them.
Mhm.
So breastfeeding is going well when, and we're gonna move on here, when feeding is comfortable. Sometimes there may be an initial pain when baby is latching on that shouldn't last for more than a few seconds. If it is not pinchy, it's not sharp, and we want to see that nipples are looking good. They're not damaged. There are no open wounds, no bleeding, or at least they're healing well, if anything.
Mhm.
That's a good time to cheerlead. Baby is content between feedings. This is telling us that baby is getting enough, and baby is also trustworthy enough to wake for the majority of their feeds. We need to know that baby is having enough to eat, resting, and then waking up when they're hungry again. Babies who are not waking up on their own could be a sign that something is wrong. They're not getting enough. They're really tired.
Mhm.
We want to see a weight loss of 7% or less after birth. And again, like we mentioned, those IV fluids in labor can increase that weight loss. So having a delayed birth weight to that 24 hours gives us a better, more accurate read on where to have our baseline when we're comparing later on.
Mhm.
If you see 10% or more, that's a red flag. That baby needs to be referred on to an IBCLC or their medical provider.
Mhm. Okay.
A trustworthy baby. So we want to see baby waking themselves to feed for the majority of the time. And what do I mean by majority? So if we have a baby waking 10 times to feed in 24 hours, we would like to see them wake themselves at least 8 times, or roughly 80% of the time.
Mhm.
We would like for good growth and development, which means being back to birth weight around that 10 to 14 day mark. Babies generally gain around an ounce a day, give or take a little bit. And they usually start gaining after what we call, normally you hear milk coming in. What that means is really transitioning to more mature milk, which has a higher volume, but we'll talk a little more about that later.
Mhm.
Hearing swallowing. When you are watching a baby breastfeed, initially you'll see baby do some very quick sucks. That's getting the letdown to happen. Once that happens and the milk is flowing, you'll see baby transition to slower, deeper sucks. And what we hope is that you can actually hear the swallowing. If you can hear the swallowing, that's a good indicator that milk transfer is happening.
Mhm. Okay. Do we have time for the video?
It's 2:23. I think we can squeeze it in.
All right. This is one of my favorites because this is Dr. Jack Newman. If anybody knows, he's a pediatrician from Canada. He's been doing this for a really long time. But I think this is a fun video. And if you're doing a home visit and you have the opportunity and the family invites you to watch and says, how do you think this breastfeeding is going? And you're watching, this might just give you some ideas of things to look for.
We try to teach the mother to latch the baby on in such a way that when the baby's on the breast, his chin touches the breast. His nose usually doesn't, even if the mother has very large breasts.
Mm-hmm.
The lips are usually flanged outwards like that. And the baby covers more of the areola with his lower lip than his upper lip. And a baby's hanging onto the breast. A baby who doesn't hang on to the breast often will not nurse at all. He'll just sit there and sleep. And this is one of the keys, especially in the first few days, that this baby isn't really latching on. He's just pretending to breastfeed. And this is a very difficult problem to deal with sometimes. So we have to make sure that mothers understand that babies are not always latched on just because they have the breast in their mouth. How do we know the baby's getting milk? That pause on the chin. That's it. Look at it. Oh, look at her drink there. Look at her drink. Oh, beauty. Lots of milk. Look at that pause on the chin. Every pause is a mouthful. You see what I mean?
looking that the chin actually drops down a little deeper and it holds. See, it holds. So watch again. When it holds, it's a mouthful. His mouth is there, there. So you see the mouth is literally filled up with milk. Take a look at the chin. We're looking for that pause when the chin drops down and holds. So suck, drink. Suck, drink. You see how?
Oh, I can't help myself. I just have to point out, watch how the mother and the helper are using their hands to compress the breast to increase the milk flow. And that's how they get the baby to drink even more. So sorry, I just had to interrupt for a moment. We got
The chin drops down the hole, so he's getting nice big mouthfuls here.
there we go. And I don't know about you, Jenny, but I have not heard a better cheerleader than Dr. Newman when he's like, look at that, look at that.
Absolutely. He's like, beautiful, gorgeous, amazing, all of the positive words, right?
Exactly.
He's a fantastic cheerleader.
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, we'll keep right on track and talk about poo patterns that are on track. So what we want to see is a transition in color for baby's bowel movements. The first day, we'll see that black tarry stool. This is meconium. By day 3 or 4, we're turning a little green, a little looser. And by 4 or 5, it should be yellow, sometimes loose and seedy, and that's okay.
Mhm.
We want to have at least 1 to 2 dirty diapers within the first 2 days. By day 3 or more, we want to see 3 or more. So relatively easy to remember. What's important to know for you is when parents are so worried about whether or not their baby's getting enough milk, I'm concerned, I don't think they're getting enough, how do I know? This is a good indicator that baby's getting enough input to have good output, and also seeing that transition from color. So a quick question is, well, tell me about your baby's poop. What does it look like? What's the texture? You would think that's a weird question, but it's not. Usually parents are ready and excited to talk about the poop. They will give you a thorough description, better than they could tell you about what their car looks like, most likely. They know, and they're excited to share because it's something they're worried about, something that matters to them, and you're showing that it matters to you too. That's going to encourage them to share.
Yeah. And I know when I was sitting with the mom and she was nursing and the baby would have a bowel movement while they were nursing, I would be all excited. I'm like, oh, let's take the diaper off and take a look. And the mom's like, oh, okay. I know it was a little weird, but I think celebrating those poopy diapers, even when they're happening, can be really a good way of letting the parent know that poopy diapers are a really good sign.
Absolutely. And let's see, checklist for early effective breastfeeding. So if anything, this is a quick, short checklist for you to know that things are usually going okay. Mom's not in pain. We're not having any open wounds. There's no cracked or bleeding nipples. They're not damaged. Or if they were at some point, they're now healing and on the mend. After day 3, we want to know that baby is stooling 3 times a day. Poopy diapers have changed color like we just talked about. We're hearing that audible swallowing. That's a good indicator that milk is transferring well. And after day 5, baby should usually gain around that ounce a day mark.
Great. So when all of this is happening, we can be cheerleaders, is what I'm hearing you say. We can exude that confidence that families need. And I think about 90% of breastfeeding support is a confidence game. It's really letting the parent know that they're doing a good job. But I've also heard families tell me that they were struggling with breastfeeding and all they got was a cheerleader. Somebody who just said, nurse, 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 it'll be just fine. Or pump, 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 it'll be just fine. So sometimes we've got to know when to shift gears.
Absolutely. I think that's very important to know when to be a cheerleader, when things are going well, and when they're really struggling, when to be that lifeguard and get them help.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to take over with kind of moving from Jenny, your lovely description of the process when it's going well. How do we know when a breastfeeding is going well? We're going to talk a little bit now about the product, the breast milk itself. And what does it look like? What can we expect? That kind of thing. And just a reminder to everyone, please drop your questions in the chat box as they occur to you. And we will circle back to that here at the end. We've allowed for 15 minutes at the end to address questions. So the nice benefit of these virtual meetings is that you can put your questions in the chat as it occurs to you. So I think some of you may be doing that. So just a reminder here, like you were saying, Jenny, that breast milk comes in all different colors. It separates the fat from the liquid part, the whey part of the milk. And our childcare providers know this really well. And if anybody expresses milk for returning to work, or if you've had a friend or a family member and you've seen expressed milk, this is not anything new to you. But if you haven't, you might be surprised that it comes in different colors. And there's actually a connection between the darker golden colored milk can occur in a mother who is not feeling well. She might be sick, and that can be an increase in those antibodies that we saw a lot of in the colostrum stage. So yellow milk can be an indication that the mother is fighting off an infection and putting those antibodies in her baby's milk, kind of like packing their lunch for what they're going to need the next day. Not only does it come in different colors, but that fat content can vary. You see the picture in the middle has a lot of fat. That is not a measure of what's normal, because every mother, when they express milk, when they pump or hand express, it will vary depending on the time of day that she is pumping. In the morning, she might get less milk than in the evening. So every single pumping session, which means every feeding, the child is getting a different composition of fat and whey. And it's that variability that actually makes the breastfed infant a more adventuresome eater later, because they have had a greater variety of tastes and smells. The breast milk might smell like cantaloupe that the mom ate earlier that day. It will have a flavor of garlic if that's what they use. So by the time the child is getting adult food, they've tasted mom's spaghetti already, and there is a food that's already familiar to them. So breast milk is pretty magical in all of those regards. But I just want to stress that there is no normal. So you couldn't look at express milk and go, I don't think she's making enough, or she's not making enough fat or something. We really can't judge from that small sample about how well breastfeeding is going, or if the breast milk's adequate. So as I already mentioned, it is waterier than formula. And some of this that I'm sharing with you, we actually share in our childcare provider course, because they may not be as familiar with expressed milk, and they're more familiar with formula. So we compare it to formula because that's something they're more familiar with. And it separates into layers that could be new and different to people, the different variant colors and smells and tastes. And some people have reported that if they have tasted breast milk, that it does have kind of an almond milk flavor, even like a vanilla ice cream flavor to that as well. So it does have a slightly sweet taste. And that's something that, again, is kind of indicative of breast milk that they might not necessarily get with formula. And another thing to remember with formula is it is static in terms of the fat composition, the taste, the consistency for an entire year that the child is getting that. So they are not getting exposed to different flavors and consistencies. All right, so this is colostrum. This is the magical milk that comes in the first the first day of life. It actually, the body begins producing this during pregnancy. As early as 16 weeks in pregnancy, some moms can express a drop or two of colostrum during pregnancy. However, we do not want to have moms measuring how much they're expressing during pregnancy as some kind of indication of how much milk they're going to have after pregnancy, because there really is no connection between how much milk she can express during pregnancy, which would probably just be a drop or two, compared to what she's actually going to be able to make after giving birth. So there's no connection there, but there is an advantage to expressing a drop or two of colostrum. And that advantage is she gets familiar with simply doing it. That hand expression that Jenny talked about during those early hours postpartum that increased milk production by like 130%. If she's been doing that during pregnancy, she's going to be comfortable doing that when she gives birth. So I think there is an advantage to that. But colostrum, small amounts. It's been referred to as liquid gold. It's a little bit thicker because the baby's learning to drink and breathe at the same time. They've been drinking amniotic fluid the whole time they're in there. But when they're born, they have to now manage suck, swallow, breathe. And that's a kind of complicated process. Colostrum is just less than a teaspoon, a half a teaspoon, and it's slightly thick, which helps the baby to manage that breathing part that's new to them. So what about serving sizes? What is it that we could expect for infants to get? And the reason we like to share this with you as home visitors is because if you're seeing the family in those first few days after birth, and the family is considering supplementing, you could help to kind of reframe the amount to say, we don't need to give the baby 2 ounces. If you're seeing the baby in the first week of life, somewhere between day 3 and 7, look at how much they need, somewhere between 0.8 to 2 ounces by day 7, and rarely would it be close to 2 ounces. So a little bit of a supplement might be a half an ounce. And in those first few days, it's really measured in terms of teaspoons and not even ounces. So I think having a sense of what is normal physiologically for infant stomachs can really help us to advise families that they don't need to get a 4-ounce bottle out for a younger baby. And even when they go on to childcare, most breastfed infants will continue to take 3 to 5 ounces for the entire time that they're nursing. Even as they get closer to a year of age, they will continue to take no more than 3 to 5 ounces. They're never going to take that 8-ounce bottle that a formula fed baby does. So serving sizes matter. All right. And then this is that transition that Jenny was talking about as the milk comes in. Remember, she was talking about the dirty diapers and how that works. Well, that's because of the milk transitioning from not only smaller volumes, but also the higher liquid amount. And breast milk is a laxative, which is why those breastfed babies sometimes have bowel movements almost at every feeding. So having 8 poopy diapers in 24 hours is not at all unusual. But again, what are the minimum number again that we should be having?
We want to see 1 to 2 during the first 2 days, and then 3 or more after day 3.
Okay, so if I'm a home visitor, by the time I see the family, they should have had 3 poopy diapers in the last 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. So sometimes families are talking about, well, how much does my baby really need? Because one of the things with breastfeeding is we can't see the volume. You know, there's not marks on the side of the breast like there is with bottles. And so it's really just having faith that the body's making as much as the baby needs. But if the family is needing numbers to say, how much does my baby really need? In the first couple of days of life, they really need just about 5 milliliters. Which is a very small amount. And when they get to day 3, we're talking 30 to 60 milliliters. And again, there's really no definitive research. These numbers are pretty wide ranging because we just don't know what the biological norm is over a period of 24 hours. Okay. So this is that over the time period. This is a slide, again, we share with childcare providers to show that for the breastfed infant between 1 month of age and 6 months of age, it really doesn't vary. It goes to 3 to 4 ounces and then it just stays there. And the formula fed baby, they have to get a bigger and bigger volume to get more calories. But remember, breast milk is pretty special. Not only does it have antibodies in it, not only does it vary by taste and smell, not only does it have the exact nutrients for the age of the baby, but it packs in more calories in each ounce as the baby gets older. So the 4 ounces at 2 months of age will have fewer calories than the 4 ounces when the baby's 6 months of age. So even though I think about it as like packing a lunch, it may still be the same lunch box that I've packed, but I can pack a lot more food in it for the 6-month-old, but the size of the lunch box hasn't changed any. I'm just putting more in it. And that's exactly what happens with breast milk, is it adjusts to the age of the child, knowing that it's getting more mobile. It has more antibodies as they start putting things in their mouth. So it really does adjust for the age of the child. And fun fact, if the mother gets pregnant while she is nursing her current child, and she gets pregnant with child number 2, or the next child, that the milk will revert to colostrum when she gives birth, and actually during the last trimester of pregnancy. So birth is kind of like a reset button with the milk, and the milk changes back to what the newborn needs. I don't know about you, Jenny, but I was like, whoa.
It like blows my mind. So with it reverting back to colostrum, is it okay for older babies to have colostrum?
Yes, it does not hurt them at all. Their bowel movements might change. So you kind of got to prepare the mom for that her toddler who's still nursing will have a different bowel movements because they're getting more colostrum. And they may not be as interested in it. I know a lot of families report that the older one will self-wean when it becomes colostrum because that volume has decreased and the taste and consistency has changed. Some will, but not all. But no, it's not harmful at all.
Well, that's good to know.
All right. So what about this supply and demand? Is it like the economics of breastfeeding? What is it you probably have heard about? So newborns need that 8 or more breastfeedings in 24 hours in order for the mom to make plenty of milk. That's a way for the mom to regulate her milk supply, is by how much the baby is taking out. That's how she establishes her milk supply. But we know that there are other factors involved too, how much she pumps. Anytime that milk is being removed, how much she hand expresses, all of that removal of breast milk increases her milk supply. So it's as simple as that. The demand drives the supply for that. So we have the magic 8 ball there. It's just a nice visual reminder that guiding families that they should be nursing at least 8 times a day, if not more, in those early weeks. We'll get them off to a good start.
Is there such a thing as too much pumping, Brenda?
Too much pumping. There might be if she's uncomfortably full. If she's nursing and pumping because she really wants to make sure she has a robust milk supply, she might get in a situation where her breasts are so full that she might get an infection or a plugged duct, or if left untreated, it could go to mastitis. So there is a risk there of doing too much pumping if she's driving her milk supply to more than what she can remove. What do you think?
I think so, but I know, at the beginning, we're so concerned about getting that supply that sometimes we go the extra mile, and it can be easy enough to maybe reduce a pumping session, reduce a hand expression session until we get back to where we need to be.
Yes. Yeah. And I think comfort is a good guide, that if she's comfortable, then she's probably fine. It's that if she wakes up in the middle of the night very uncomfortable, like she can't roll over because her breasts are painfully engorged, that would be an indication that maybe if she's pumping in addition to nursing, she might need to dial that back. So I want to introduce everybody to Phil. Phil is this really cool little hormone that is in mother's breasts, and it actually is like a stop sign that when breasts are full of milk, Phil comes out and says, stop making milk, shut down the milk factory. We have way too much milk. And when the breasts are empty is when they actually make the most. I shouldn't say empty because they're never actually empty. When the breasts are soft and not full of milk is when they're in full production of making milk. So there used to be this not very good advice that we would tell moms, wait until your breasts fill up, wait until your breasts feel full before you nurse. You shouldn't nurse too much because you have to wait for them to fill up. And we actually know that that's bad advice. That's really bad advice, because Phil comes out and says, stop making milk. So we want to avoid full breasts. So if that means more nursing, babies are so much more fun than pumps. But if the baby's not interested, then maybe hand expression or occasional pumping just to soften the breast will help to increase her milk supply. So that can be a good strategy. So if you walk away with just one thing, remember Phil, we don't want full breasts because we want to make sure that the breasts are in full milk production mode. Full breasts mean that the milk production stopped. All right. So we want to make sure now that we are talking about this initial period of setting expectations for what is breastfeeding really going to be like. And is it going to hurt? How do I know if I have a good latch? How do I know if I have enough milk? These are all probably the top 3 questions that we get from moms in these early days. So we're going to talk about what is a good latch. I'm going to pass it over in a minute to Jenny, and she's going to walk us through what is a good latch to avoid that toe curling pain. We also want to prepare them for those hormonal changes that they're going to be going through as well. There may be a point, like Jenny was talking about, where there is a bit of tenderness at the beginning of a breastfeeding. So some breathing or relaxation exercises might be helpful as well. And that pain tenderness shouldn't last, I say, more than the count of 10. If you've counted to 10 and it's still there, then you need to take the baby off the breast and start again. But it might be that she just needs to take a breath while there's that tender part. Paying attention to the pain. And if the pain is getting worse and does not subside by day 7, that can really be a concern. And if she already has pre-existing chronic pain, that might actually put her at risk for more severe pain related to lactation as well. And above all, we want to disassociate this idea that pain is related to competence, because 9 times out of 10, it's really not what the mother is doing as much as it is what the baby's doing. Remember, there's a partner in this dance. And if my partner is stepping on my toes all the time, I can be the best dancer in the world, but my partner hasn't learned yet. And sometimes that's the key here with breastfeeding, is that we have to teach the baby as much or more than we have to teach the mother. So this reality versus expectation. And I want to show you this graphic that Vanessa Flood made that I thought was a really good indication of expectations versus reality. Line 1 is often the expectation of how often I'm going to nurse my new baby when it's my first baby. And I think they're going to nurse, I've heard they're going to nurse every 2 to 3 hours. So it's like I set my clock every 2 to 3 hours. I'm going to get so much done between nursings, right? Because I'm going to have 2 hours between nursings. I'm going to, do all the things, all the projects I've been saving up. But guess what? Line 2 is reality. Line 2 is the frequency of nursing. Yes, sometimes they do go every 2 hours, but then the big blue dot is these cluster feedings or the really long feedings. Sometimes they're just not done for a while. I call those like the Thanksgiving meals. They just want to tuck in and be there for a while. And then other times they're just coming to the table for a snack. And those are the shorter nursings. And then oftentimes in the evening, we have this pattern called cluster feeding, where they seem to want to nurse all the time and just hang out there. And sometimes families, if they don't know about this in advance, they think something's wrong. They think that their baby isn't getting enough. They almost always question their milk supply, when in reality, that's normal baby behavior. So as home visitors, if we can frame line 2 as the norm, and again, be cheerleaders to say you're doing a great job responding to what your baby needs, and you're going to be, you'll have so much more milk this way, and they don't nurse on a schedule, they're going to have this kind of a pattern. Now, line 3 has a lifeguard by it, because if we see the type of nursing where they're at the breast all the time, not just in evening hours or not just for a period of the day, but this is the parent who calls you and says, my baby's at the breast all the time. Now think back to the video. Remember, Dr. Newman said just because they're at the breast doesn't mean they're nursing, right? So the first question I ask is, when they're at the breast, do you hear them swallowing? Do you see their jaw moving, big jaw movements? Are they actively drinking and eating, or are they just hanging out? So if they're just hanging out, we don't really count that as a feeding. But if they're actively nursing and they're wanting to be at the breast all the time, that could be an indication of a low milk supply, where the baby's just not able to transfer enough milk at each feeding. So he has to simply go back to the buffet table over and over again. And we got to figure out why that is. So number 2 is the reality line, and number 3 is more of an indication that there might be a problem.
And I just want to mention, Brenda, that line 2 with those evening cluster feeds, that can be very common when moms and babies are separated during the daytime because they're working. Babies can be stubborn. And so they will hold out and wait until they're back together with mom, because the bottle's like, it's okay. and it'll do, but it's not as good as mom. So when mom's home and they're together again, it's those cluster feeds because they're just excited to be back together.
Yes, I hear. Very good point. And I've been so excited about talking, and I just did a time check, Jenny, and I'm afraid that I have not allowed enough time. So I just wanted to give you a time check that I think we're about 11 minutes before we move into Q&A.
Okay, I think we can do this.
Okay.
So let's talk real briefly about what makes a good latch. I'll give you 2 words. We want to see asymmetric and deep. We don't want to hear symmetrical and shallow. So with an asymmetric latch, things you can do to start off well is having baby tummy to tummy. Imagine if you're sitting at one of those high top tables and your feet are dangling and you're like a little off center and your stool also is kind of off kilter, kind of hard to eat. You're distracted, it's not comfortable. So we want baby tummy to give stability. And then we want to start nose to nipple. By starting nose to nipple, that's going to line baby up for that asymmetric latch. We also want to make sure that we're supporting baby behind the shoulders and not the head, because what that will allow baby to do is lean back to do a wide open gape to then latch onto the breast. That gives baby the opportunity to really get that solid, deep, asymmetrical latch. We want to see flanged lips, not lips turned in. And then also making sure, again, we're tucked in close and comfortable for both mom and baby.
Okay. Do we have time for the video? What do you think?
We got
Maybe
10
just
minutes.
this.
I think we can do a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, just a little bit of this one. Okay.
You can tell he's ready to nurse because he's trying to turn his head and eat his fingers and chew on stuff. We're going to talk about how to get a good latch. I'm holding him in the cross cradle position so I can position his head better. If you look, tickle the upper lip until he opens his mouth wide. And you always have to get their hands out of the way. Okay, open up. Once he opens his mouth up, bring the baby to the breast really quickly before they close their mouth again. And if you
Okay. I'm going to stop there because I know, Jenny, you've got some pictures you want to show us. And she put her hand on the back of his head. I would say they obviously ended up in a good spot, but if it hurt, that's probably one of the things I might suggest to her is to use, like you were saying, more around the neck. But obviously this is an experienced mom. And I always say, if it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll skip this one. All right. We ready for the game?
Yes, let's do the latch game. So we're going to briefly look at some photos and just talk about what we see for latch.
Okay. And by talk, we mean in the chat. So drop into the chat what you're seeing.
Okay, we've got a mom laying side by side, just doing some side laying breastfeeding. And I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I'll talk about it while we're waiting for answers to fill in. What I notice is that baby's head is turned. So when me as an adult and I'm eating or drinking, to have my head turned and to try to eat or drink this way can be a little uncomfortable. It makes it a little harder to swallow. Yes, baby's head is not aligned. We're not tucked in close. We're not belly to belly. Absolutely. Good job, guys. Okay, next picture. We've got baby here looking at mom very intently. We're communicating, we're in tune, but yes, our lips are not flanged out, they are tight. It's kind of a very narrow latch. That could be painful.
Ouch.
We've got some tug of war with our nipple here. Baby is turned looking away, and that happens. A lot of times when babies get older, they're distractible. They're just interested in what's going on. So they are looking around, and sometimes that can cause pain to mom. But like you said, Brenda, if it's not broken, we don't have to fix it with our older babies who have already well-established breastfeeding. What do we have here? Good latch. Yes, we've got baby's hands around the breast. I know when initially we're first starting, a lot of times we try to tuck the arms away to get them out of the way and focus on this, but actually having baby's arms around the breast can help stimulate the breast by baby kind of like kittens do, right? We're making bread, we're just doing that, and that will stimulate let down. So this is a good latch. Yes.
Right. Skin to skin, like you taught us earlier, right?
Skin to skin. We've got those lips flanged. We have a little baby here. Let's see, what does the audience think we see? This is a little tougher. Sometimes the side laying position with smaller babies can be difficult and it can cause pain. A lot of times older babies do better in this position.
Mhm,
Yes, side nursing is better for experienced nursers.
mhm.
Mom is bringing the breast to baby instead of bringing baby to breast. Absolutely. So kind of thinking about if you have a hamburger and you kind of just shove it in your face, that's not always fun. Like it doesn't work so well. You need to be able to come to it and get a good gape.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I want to do when I see that picture, Jenny, is I want to just tuck that baby's butt in. Because think
Yeah.
about when if you put the baby's butt in closer, the head comes back. And oftentimes, you know, those parents that are putting their finger on the breast so the baby can breathe, you can solve that by doing the butt tuck. Just move that butt in closer and then the head comes out. And that's with this picture, that's what it makes me think of is the butt tuck.
Yes, close and comfortable.
Yep.
Okay, next picture. You know, I think we've got a lot of experienced breastfeeding champions in our chat. They know what's up.
They're good at this.
They
All
are
right.
very good at this.
Oh, we could have them do thumbs up if you like it. Is this a
Oh,
good
yeah. Look, so far everybody says good latch.
one? Mhm.
Mhm.
Tummy to tummy on this one too.
Yeah. Ooh, thumbs up. There we go.
Mhm.
Now we're using a pillow. It's a little hard to assess the latch itself, but what do we think about positioning?
Mhm.
I think pillows can be a very helpful tool in supporting mom. It's really important to have mom get comfortable first.
Mhm.
So often when we're using a pillow, what I see is we put the pillow in our lap, we put the baby on the pillow, and then we lean forward to get to baby.
Yeah.
No one wants to sit like that for an extended period of time. So start with mom. Mom needs to be comfortable first, and then we can bring baby to mom and put everything else together to support them.
There you go. I like to tell parents to get in the position that you would if you were going to binge watch TV. You know how you like
Yes.
to kind of scoot your hips forward, put your feet up on the coffee table kind of thing. That kind of position, right?
Absolutely. All right. I think this is our last one. So what do we think here? I see our hand. Our hand is right here. So sometimes when our hands are here, they can get in the way of that tummy to tummy, and they can cause just a little rotation. We're maybe not quite aligned as we could be.
Mhm.
If it's working well, maybe it's fine. But I would like to see that hand moved around the breast and, you know, let it do its thing, do some good stimulation, help that milk production.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, the mouth seems to not be quite as wide as some of those other pictures as well, a little bit of a wider gape. I think
Yeah.
the first thing I would do is ask this mom, how does this feel? That's one of my
Mhm.
favorite questions. Because I did a lot of home visits and it's really hard to tell just from looking sometimes how well things are going. And I can always tell from the look in her eyes, if her shoulders are up by her ears, that it hurts. And if she's like, can't breathe because she's in pain, I don't care what it looks like. That's a bad latch. And we got to start.
Absolutely. And we can't just say, it's fine.
Yeah. Right. It's not
Fine.
fine. Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. All right. Thanks, Jenny, for the latch game. I do think we have a lot of experts in the audience. So we will to wrap this up here really quick since we have so many people that are experts, but I do want to share some new resources. So just a reminder, when we need our lifeguards, and we cannot continue to say it's just fine, just keep nursing. We really need lifeguards when we don't have the poopy diaper output, like you were talking about, Jenny, when we don't have the transitional stools, if the mother doesn't report that her breasts are feeling slightly fuller by day 4, meaning it didn't transition, if the baby is sleepy, like lethargic sleepy and not rousing to feed, at least 80% of the time, like you were saying, slow weight gain, we've already talked about, persistent painful nursing cannot be ignored. It's breasts do not toughen up. Nipples do not get calloused. They don't toughen up. It's only going to get worse. So painful nursing needs to be addressed. And a baby who refuses to nurse and those painful breasts, not the nipple, but if the breast is tender to the touch or the mother has a fever, these can be indications of plugged ducts or mastitis that will need treatment. So we cannot be cheerleaders through any of that. We need to call in our lifeguards. So let's talk for a moment now. How do we find our lifeguards? Where are they? So we have a local resource directory on our website that's searchable by zip code and city. And you type that in and the red Google map is populated with the little red dots of all the breastfeeding resources, WIC, hospitals, everybody that we know that's out there doing good breastfeeding work are in there. We also have this 911 card that you can order. It's a business card. And on the back, it has a QR code that takes families to that website. So we call it 911. Thanks, Michelle, so that we can get families to that local resource directory and to their lifeguards. And what do we do until the lifeguard arrives? And I can summarize this by feed the baby and protect the milk supply, those two things. And if feed the baby is with the mother's own milk first, by hand expression or pumping, donor human milk if it's available, and then formula is a third option if needed. But feed the baby first and then protect the milk supply, or while continuing to increase the milk supply, really summarizes, I think, everything on here until your lifeguard arrives. We'll skip that slide. Here are some more of the resources. We do have these feeding tips cards, which has the storage guidelines and these bag tags. They look like luggage tags that are meant to go on a breast pump bag that tell women how to optimize their pumping experience and how much they're collecting while they're maybe away at work or school. And lastly, what's the KBC? We invite you to join us and to join the fellow people around the state that are working to improve the landscape of breastfeeding support. There's now almost 2,400 of us in all corners of the state. And if you're not getting emails from us, we invite you to join us. We have a simple join form. We also have sections. If you're interested in taking a deeper dive into public health, childcare, local breastfeeding coalitions, or hospital work, we have meetings online every other month on those topics, and we invite you to join us. We have our conference coming up. So if you want to extend your learning about breastfeeding, the conference will be in Wichita, October 13th and 14th. We have fantastic speakers from out of state and in state that are going to be describing what they are doing to improve the landscape of breastfeeding in Kansas. And then lastly, we have two types of classes. We have a breastfeeding 101 and 201. So if you are intrigued by anything that you have learned and you would like to learn more, this would be a way of extending your learning. The basics is a 4-hour class. Breastfeeding 201 is an 8-hour class over 2 4-hour sessions. They're all online. So these are just some opportunities we wanted you to be aware of. And then we will end here and open it up to questions. I will leave this with our contact information here. So what's been happening in the chat, Jenny? Tell me. Do we have questions?
Yes, we do. So a quick question is, do you have any tips for positioning and latching with multiples?
Yes, creativity, creativity. I think typically getting the one baby latched on at a time, getting the first baby latched on, usually one is in a football position, which means off to the side, and then the other may be in a football position or a cross cradle hold as well. So one, obviously we can't do both at the same time. And it also involves quite a bit of pillows and support, because obviously the mother has one hand on each of the infants. So she needs to figure out what's most comfortable for her. And some babies develop a preference for certain positions or even certain sides. So I think we have to take that into account as well. Jenny, do you have suggestions?
I think that's really good. And again, being innovative and creative and just whatever works, right? I've seen some moms breastfeed babies where one's laying up here and then the other's across the side. So whatever works.
Whatever works. I think the key with multiples is really that getting one settled and happy, and then somebody bringing the next one to you to get the second one latched on. Some moms find that they will be nursing twins at the same time, but others prefer to alternate one and then the other. So finding their own pattern. There are some great books. Does anybody read books anymore? I don't know, but there's some great books on that. There's also some good websites as well.
We actually have an attendee who had two sets of twins and rarely fed them both at the same time. They didn't tandem feed. So
All right, there you go. Thanks for that lived experience.
absolutely. And then we have another attendee who was a mom of a preemie who really struggled and with stress and worry. Any helpful tips on how to support those moms?
Yes, that is, it is a stressful situation because there's a lot of anxiety and worry about the health of the mom and the baby with the preemie. We do have an entire session on the transitioning of the preemie from hospital to home in the Breastfeeding 201 course. I think that it's important, especially for the mothers of preemies, to have that breastfeeding lifeguard. They need to have an expert that they have access to be able to answer questions, because they're going to have more questions than most. And I think also to know what's normal for the gestational age of their baby. A lot of times I would work with a mom who'd say, my infant is 2 months old, but really gestationally, because they were born early, they were only 2 weeks old. And we have to take that into account, because that suck, swallow, breathe that I talked about earlier is a skill that's learned later in the gestational period. So we have to just give the premature infants even more time and more patience. They will learn it, they will get it, but they may need a bit more time.
Yes. Any advice for babies that start to nip at nipples, that biting and chomping?
Yeah. Usually that happens at the end of a feeding when they're playing and they're really communicating. They're trying to say like, hey, I'm here. The parent might be distracted. They might be doing something else on their phone. And the infant is just like, I wonder what happens if I do this. So the best advice, if that pattern starts, is to be vigilant and to end the feeding as soon as the child is done actively breastfeeding, and not giving them the opportunity to just hang out at the breast like you might have normally. So end the feeding as soon as they're done, basically like taking them away from the table so they don't have a chance to have that bad behavior.
That's what I had to do with my oldest. Once she started biting, I had to pay attention and realize when she was about done, starting to get distracted, and I knew the bite was coming. So we just called it quits before that happened.
Yes.
And let's see, any recommendations on how often older babies should poop? We're talking past those initial first few days.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because the pooping pattern changes dramatically at about 6 weeks of age, because what happens is, remember that milk is changing and evolving, and it gets higher in protein. And the protein takes longer for the baby to digest. So the bowel movements start to slow down. And as the child gets older, I think 2 to 3 months of age, it's not uncommon for them to go up to a week between bowel movements. And then when that does happen, they're usually larger in volume, multiple diapers, but that pattern of spacing out the bowel movements can become further and further apart as the breast milk gets further and further, more and more protein in it. So the pattern does change. Don't freak out. Don't worry. Unless when the baby does have a bowel movement, they're in pain. If it's a painful process, then you should see a healthcare provider.
Absolutely. Again, that comfort piece. And, if things are comfortable, we're probably okay. But when things are uncomfortable, that's usually a sign something is going on.
Yes.
I did note some questions about becoming an IBCLC. And I just want to say, if there is anyone in the audience that is interested in learning more about becoming an IBCLC, feel free to email myself or Brenda. It's a little complicated. There's different pathways, and we can walk through that and see if this is a good viable option for you and which pathway makes sense for you. We would be happy to do that.
Yes. And we hope to continue our scholarship program. We just awarded 10 scholarships. It's kind of 8. Okay, 8 scholarships. It's our 3rd year in a row. We hope to have a 4th year of awarding scholarships for people who do want to become a lactation support provider. For some, that might be taking a mid-level course where you take a class online for 55 hours of credit. For others, they might be applying that scholarship towards the IBCLC exam. And as you said, Jenny, there's several different requirements to be eligible for taking the exam. And we're happy to walk through that. We do have information on our website. If you go to our work, we have a clinical lactation training program, and there's a lovely video there from Hannah Holloway breaking it all down, like really telling you step by step, how do you become an IBCLC? So start there. And if you still have questions, like Jenny said, we're happy to help.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, we've got so many questions, Brenda.
Oh no,
It's an
so little
active
time.
audience.
Um,
Let's see. Any tips on weaning? We're at the other end of the spectrum. We have an older baby that is not ready to wean, but mom is ready to wean.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And full disclosure here, I'm a retired La Leche League leader, and I feel that La Leche League is an organization that really excels at this question because they see the full spectrum of breastfeeding support, and they have some really good information on their website on weaning. My favorite tips, I called them the 6 Ds of weaning, and I'm not going to remember all the Ds, but it was distractions, and also don't sit down, and don't nurse in the same chair or the location where you would normally nurse. You're basically trying to break some of the patterns that may have been associated with nursing. So check out the La Leche League website because I do think they have a lot of tips and tricks for that. But it's slow and steady.
And I wanted to check in with Michelle. How are we doing on time?
We have 5 minutes left. Okay.
5 minutes left.
So we can
Okay.
take a couple more questions.
Okay, we have prenatal moms who are collecting colostrum with a syringe and storing it in the freezer. Any suggestions or cautions for storage?
The same caution, the same storage precautions you would give for any parent expressing milk. Just to look at the time period that in the freezer, it's good for 6 months. So chances are that it's going to be just fine. So making sure that they're storing it in a food grade bag. I don't know if storing in a syringe would be considered safe. Jenny, I'm going to look to you on this one. What do you think?
I know it's a common practice just because of the amount.
Yeah.
I would say be very careful with washing hands. A lot of times people will put those syringes into other containers just to make sure the tips and everything still stay clean.
Yes.
So yeah, those kinds of things.
Yeah, so we're really talking about the cleanliness of where you're setting that. I do know that women who are diabetic are often encouraged to express breast milk during pregnancy because oftentimes their babies will need a little extra dose. And then it's nice to have some of their own express breast milk ready for their baby in the hospital so they don't need to use infant formula. So I know that's particularly for our diabetic moms during pregnancy where that would be important.
Okay, I think this will probably be our last question to wrap up with moms who are working with healthcare providers and hearing different recommendations. Do you have advice on how to support moms through that communication where, you know, doctor says it's okay for baby to not poop for 7 days, but baby's uncomfortable? What do we do?
Right. Oh my goodness. I really think that the parents' instincts are often helpful in this. They know in their gut if their child is doing well or not. But I do think that it's one of the challenges of being a parent is listening to various advice and sorting through that. And you have to look at the credible sources of information. And I think the most credible source of information is the parent, the child, and hopefully a well-informed healthcare provider. If for some reason you feel that the healthcare provider may not be an expert on breastfeeding or has limited knowledge, it's okay to seek another opinion and get a second opinion when it comes to infant feeding, because not all pediatricians or family physicians have had a lot of training in breastfeeding. So if your hunch is that their information may not be accurate, it's okay to get another opinion.
I think so. And I think it's important to recognize that this is a healthcare team, and that can include your lactation provider. So where, IBCLCs are experts in infant feeding, especially lactation. Hopefully they can have a good relationship with that provider and open that discussion.
Yes. Yeah. Communication is so key. And I think like so many things, our children teach us how to be advocates. And that is something that we use for, across their whole life. So this may just be the beginning of your advocacy for your children. So what a great group today. This has been fun. I hope everybody else has had a great time. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Everyone has been just wonderful, so engaged and interactive in the chat.
Yes, I see a lot of familiar faces. Hello to people that we know, and for those that we haven't had a pleasure of meeting yet, please reach out to us. We would love to meet you and support you, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Yes. Bye, Jenny.
Bye-bye.